Hello and welcome to this commentary for Detour. In this commentary, I'm going to be giving you all the behind-the-scenes facts, the Easter eggs, and all the juicy lore that we've sprinkled in during the film. So Detour as a film was created way back in late 2022, actually. I just come off of making Unlucky Charms, and that had done rather well as a horror film online, so I decided to try and capitalize on the success of that by creating another horror film very quickly. Because in this job, I create these short films like Detour, Unlucky Charms, things like that. I do this in between my commercial work, so the real balance is trying to create a film that can be made quick enough by myself where I don't get interrupted by, say, other jobs. So things like that, things like Detour, Unlucky Charms, those have to be made in a few months at most, because if they're ever interrupted halfway through, that sort of takes the whole steam out of the project and it can die a very sad death. And that's actually what happened to Detour in the end, where it was created in 2022. Half the film was made, the creature was modeled, the broad beats of the film were planned out, and then jobs came in during the February of the next year, and the whole thing sort of died after that. Come to late 2024, in around September, I had some free time in between projects, and I was like, this film is nearly complete at this point. It would only take me a few more weeks to sort of polish out a lot of the story things, do the animation, do the rendering, things like that. And so the final film was born in the end. When conceiving of the film itself, it was very important that it hit two different marks. The first being that it was easy enough for me to create by myself, and the second one being that it was not a redundant film, similar to sort of a lot of the other things you see online. And the film itself is very much inspired by things like the backrooms, the sort of found footage, YouTube type videos that you might see where you put like a big VHS filter over the top of it. I really like the idea of leaning into that, but doing it from a unique perspective. And something like a dash cam I had never seen before. It really is like a found footage perspective that you don't see too often in the end. So combining that, putting a VHS filter on it, allowed me to first off make the film very quickly, because at this point it's mostly just animating a car driving through the forest, but also make it look pretty decent with not a whole lot of effort, although this still took months to do in the end, but it lowers the bar in terms of the visuals you have to create. So without any further ado, let's get into the film. So just starting straight out, we have this opening, and this is something that really leans into the fact that this film there are two versions of the film that were created very early on. So the version in 2022 is very different from the version that we finally got in 2024. This actually has two elements that you don't see in the original version of the film that we conceived of. The first being rain. The entire film itself is covered in rain. Everything is wet. There's pouring rain throughout. There's windshield wipers. All this stuff came when the film was revived in late 2024. Because I had progressed at that point in my 3D abilities where I felt like I could achieve the idea of doing rain throughout the entire thing, and the rendering power of my computer could actually handle it in the end. This was something that would be impossible in 2022 and barely possible now. It really pushed my computer to the limits at points, and if I had to go back, I don't know if I would have done it, because it created some headaches that I will talk about later. But if you're ever doing 3D and you can get the opportunity to make rain work in a scene, I would highly recommend you do it, because it makes everything look so much more legit. I think it really enhances especially the chase scenes later in the film when we're sort of backing through the woods at high speeds. You really get the sense of motion. You can really see it makes everything look more wet, more realistic. So that was sort of why we added rain in the first place, but it was certainly a pain in the end. The second big thing that we see here is actually this opening was conceived of for this version of the film. Originally, it was going to start in the woods. The car is already driving and turning around to see the detour sign, so it was going to start very much later in the film. And this was a way to sort of ease you into that bit. We just didn't want to start it right in the forest, because originally the film really wanted to be like done in one take, a single shot is sort of continuous as it goes through, gets chased, and that sort of ends there. And that's what the film mostly is, but again, we did add this scene to really get you in the sense of this guy brought himself into his own fate by choosing to turn off the road, take a shortcut through the sketchy woods, and that sort of leads to his ultimate demise. So it gives him a little bit more agency, it gives us a bit more context, and it also allowed us to do this, what I think is a pretty cool cut to the title. You'll also notice we did introduce these cutaways to the mysterious what ultimately turns out to be the stomach of the creature at the end. But it's a way to sort of hint at what is about to happen in this film. And it was purely done for YouTube. It was is very much something where if I were doing this for a film festival or something other than trying to attract people on the internet, I would not have done it again, because it very much is just trying to give you a tease, a preview of what's to happen, so you don't click away from the video in the first like 5 seconds. So it's trying to pique your interest. But a lot of people have pointed out since the film came out that you don't really need it, which I absolutely agree with. But I think in terms of trying to grab as many eyeballs as possible in the first 5 seconds, it does the job. And I think the reveal of the title is fun, in my opinion. And so this is actually the introduction of our first mistake for the film. When this came out, I did not anticipate it to be picked apart as much as it has. So there's some things that I just did not anticipate people really frame by framing through the video for us. And the first one is up here. You can see as the car turns off the highway, there are no cars in front of it. This is supposed to be a giant traffic jam going off into oblivion. And the cars are really actually just too deep. There's only 2 cars ahead of them. I didn't realize that you could actually see them in the corner here when he's going off. So this is just purely a mistake. And if I normally it would be going way off into the distance. And the song that you hear on the radio is also one of those other late additions to the film. This is actually the very last thing that was added, because there was, once again, a debate throughout the production of the film whether or not to have this sort of sillier, upbeat pop song on the radio, especially when the car is reversing out of the monster's grasp, and the song bursts into its bridge or whatever, and it sort of creates a very funny moment in an otherwise terrifying scene. So there's a lot of back and forth about that, whether or not it would feel like it undercuts the scene itself to have the pop song sort of make it feel like a sillier moment. But ultimately, the idea to put the pop song in and to add a lot of texture throughout the film by just having it on the radio won out in the end. And I think it's a worthy addition. It brings some fun to it, at least. And some eagle-eyed viewers might notice the first appearance of the monster in the trees here as we do the turn. If you also listen very carefully, you'll hear the clattering of the teeth. That is the monster's trademark sound. And so whenever doing a film like this, where you have a continuous single shot from a dash cam's point of view, you're left with the big challenge of how do you parse out the information of the film in a way that feels realistic to without cutting. So is it realistic that he comes across a detour sign, then he comes across the monster, all in these very short periods of time? Because you want to make them close enough where someone doesn't click out of the video, because it's very boring to just have someone driving along a road, but you got to make it long enough where it's doesn't feel like the road is 2 feet wide or 2 feet long, and he's just encountering these things one after another. So there's a very specific interest curve that we had to try and manage here, where we introduce the detour sign, then we introduce the stoplight, the traffic light, and then we introduce the monster after that without taking too much time in between here. So there's definitely a balance there, because we also didn't want to cut. And that's something you really don't appreciate until it's gone, the ability to edit around the dead time in here. There's a lot of pre-production in terms of making a rough animatic of the film to get the timing just right with how the car moves, with how long the roads are. So there's a lot of back and forth there. If you listen very carefully in a second, you actually can hear the monster scurrying along the woods to our left here, just to imply that it has run from the road that we just saw it at and is now set up as a traffic light right at the intersection here. And if you look very carefully, you can see it's actually it's near impossible to spot. But if you look at the lightning as it flashes up here, some people have very expertly pointed out that there you can actually see the creature hanging upside down from the trees, and the traffic light basically is hanging down from it. This is an animation mistake that I did that was purposely left in because I thought it was pretty funny looking. The monster does not hang from trees, and it is absurd that you can see it here sort of as this giant blob basically just hanging in the air. But we had to have some way for the traffic light to be in the shot without the headlights illuminating it. So obviously the best way to do that is just have it way up in the trees out of view of the lights. And so this is our first introduction to the idea that something is not right in the woods here. Why is there a traffic light in the middle of the woods? Why is it also shining into all four directions of the road instead of having it pointing at one direction? All these things are very mysterious. You can also see the traffic light itself is held up by something that is very much not a wire. It is very organic looking. So there are a few little hints here and there that something's probably not right here. And originally as well, we had instead of a green light, it was going to be a green traffic arrow that points him to go to the right as a way to sort of lure him into the corner where the monster is ultimately going to catch him. That was taken out because it felt a bit weird. But I think it would have been a perfectly fine addition to have the monster sort of more actively directing him into a snare. Oh, and what's this? On the right side, you can see something is moving through the forest as well. I don't think everyone notices this on their first playthrough of the video, but yeah, you can very much tell that there is something lumbering to the right of us because the monster essentially wanted him to go straight into the monster's mouth. He turned left, and now the monster's scrambling over to try and correct that in the end. And that's why, as he turns, you can see the traffic light is now swinging wildly as the monster has now settled into place right in front of the car. A lot of people have also pointed out that the traffic light goes from red to yellow to green, which is incorrect. It also shines in all four directions at the same time. These are, once again, little subtle signs that this is not a normal traffic light. The idea that it is going in reverse in terms of the light orders, and that it shines in directions that it just shouldn't. And now we have just pure darkness at this point. Originally, the monster was supposed to be a lot more visible as he approaches. The headlights normally would illuminate the bottom part of the monster. You can hear the proximity alarm going off as well as it gets closer and closer to something. So up until the very end, the monster was visible from like sort of the chin down. But this sort of stretched credulity at this point, that the person would not drive away at this point, would not be freaking out because there's clearly something there. So instead we opted for it to just be pure darkness until he turns on his high beams, which is not realistic, but it makes the reveal more impactful of the creature and gives us a valid reason for why this person's not just immediately freaking out and driving away. And so there's the creature itself. Normally, I actually animate these things with motion capture animation, so usually I would put on a suit that has all these sensors on my arms and legs to allow me to basically act out what the characters might be doing. We tried that with this creature. It is in no way humanoid in appearance, so that really just doesn't work. So this entire thing had to be animated by hand, which I can do, but it's something that is not my forte. So luckily we hide it with a lot of camera shake and a lot of random wiggling motions of the monster. But yeah, this was definitely a struggle to properly animate a monster sort of chasing after the car with the proper weight and physics that this would require. And I would like to address the idea that this person is essentially backing up at 90 miles per hour in the middle of the forest, which a lot of people have pointed out is a bit insane. You can see here the point of this whole guard barrier being here is to provide a vague reason for him to be able to sort of quickly turn out of the corner here. It definitely provides at least some sort of motivation for, all right, how did he do this 90-degree turn at this speed? It's because he hit the barrier. But yes, and then he proceeds to back up for quite a while at very, very high speeds, doing turns and whatnot as the monster chases him, which I will agree is extremely unrealistic. But we tried this at slower speeds, and it really feels very underwhelming when you're going backwards at like 30 miles per hour or 50 miles per hour. So this is extremely fast. I don't think I ever figure out how fast, but I would estimate it's definitely somewhere around like 80 miles per hour. And that introduces the big challenge of how do we get the monster to keep up with the car if it's going so fast backwards? Because this is a huge monster with the tiniest of legs. And I've gotten a lot of questions since then of how is this monster with these tiny legs going so fast at the car? And the practical reason is it really has to just keep up with the chase. But the lore reason that I've given, which is just sort of pulled out of thin air, is that it has a slick underbelly, the creature, so it's able to basically slide itself along the road with the aid of its forelegs, actually. And that's why it can go so quickly. But realistically, we have to keep the excitement. We have to make it feel exciting, and this is the best way you do that. And there was also a lot of work that went into sort of trying to tailor the shape of the road to add a lot of interest to the chase scene, because the road itself used to be, I believe, twice as long as it is now. So the chase scene went on for far, far longer than it actually did here. It was cut down quite a lot in the end. So we tried to make there be various points of interest for the chase, where the first part is him just escaping the monster, then, the monster is gone, and then we see it start to catch up to him. He starts doing all these turns, so it gets into it feels very curvy, and at that point the monster is so close, and then then the tunnel comes in and traps the monster from chasing after him. So it was those three moments that we wanted to emphasize, but we also made sure to make only at least a few seconds long, because it turns out backing up for 30 seconds at a time is just not interesting to watch. And the saddest part, I think, is as he escapes the monster, you can hear it doing a scream of pain, because this creature does have some form of intelligence, we've decided. And the idea of including the scream is that it's very upset that it didn't catch the car, because it chases cars as sort of a way of amusing itself with its food. So the fact that this one actually managed to escape, it's very upset about that, so it lets out this wail of pain that I thought was a nice touch. And then we get into the second major bit of contention for this film, is the car itself crashing and having to do a 180 turn and go straight down the road. Originally in the film, the car was meant to continue backwards for even longer and then end up in the spike trap at the very end without ever seeing it. So it was going to be the bridge or the tunnel, and then the car keeps going backwards, and then it hits the spikes. There was a lot of pushback from some of us to make the car have to turn around at some point, because it felt absurd to some people that the guy was just going backwards for so long in the chase scene. I ultimately I wanted it to just continue backwards, but in the end, I felt it at least added a moment of respite in the chase scene. So there's a moment when you think he's escaped, and you get to stop the car, take a breath, and then he continues down the road. So the idea of him hitting the bridge, hitting the barrier, and that turns the car at least partially part of the way around was my way of sort of finding a middle ground there, where I felt it was a bit silly if he just did a 180 turn out of nowhere. So him partially crashing was the way to achieve that. And now, he's escaped. It's all better now. So we get a nice, at least 10-second section of him just going straight down the road with nothing happening. And then, oh no, there's a spike trap. So the idea with the spike trap and with the detour sign at the very beginning is to imply that the monster itself has this form of intelligence, and it has set many traps for him. So both the detour sign in the beginning is a way of luring him into the monster's area, and then these signs, these spike traps, essentially are a contingency plan the monster has made to stop any cars that might try to escape. And in this case, that has worked out perfectly to stop this guy. Another late addition, the accident detection voice was very last minute. Just another bit of adding texture to the scene to make it feel a bit more alive, similar to how the radio was added in the beginning, or the weather report is added at the very start. All of these are just to sort of add something on the radio, in the car speakers, to make it feel a bit more realistic and to keep your attention throughout, essentially. And then I always loved the idea. The film was very much created around this moment where you have the emergency flashers on the lights blinking on and off for an extended period of time, and you sort of see snapshots of the creature as it gets closer and closer to the car as the guy's trying to get out, because the doors have unfortunately jammed from this crash that he's been in. So I always liked that idea. And in the original version of the film, instead of the monster getting closer and closer, and then him turning on the lights, and the monster is now right in front of him, the monster was actually going to be completely disappeared at that point. This was cut out in the middle of production because it felt a bit unrealistic that the monster, who is very huge, is just now completely gone. Because it would have been the monster's gone, lights blink, and then it comes back and the monster is right in front of him. So, it felt a bit too absurd to have the monster completely disappear to some other part of the woods, essentially. So we just cut that bit out and just have it cut straight to the whole thing. And so I would like just to point out the insanity that the monster emergency light sequence was to render. This is essentially 25 seconds of a single shot of the monster getting slowly closer and closer. And I did mention the issues with the rain that we had earlier in production. The rain itself, while I think it's a great addition to the film, this is the part that nearly killed me. This one shot, for some reason, whenever you're doing 3D, there's always going to be like one shot that for whatever reason is taking so long to render, and I could never figure out why this shot in particular took years to render every single frame. It took at least 3 times as long to render these frames as it did to take any other frames of the film. And it got to such a point that this shot is actually a Frankenstein duct tape version together of the shot, where I've rendered out the various different elements. The rain is separate, the monster is separate, the car is separate. All of this essentially so that I can Frankenstein it all together in compositing, in post-production or whatever, and avoid having to render 25 seconds of the shot, because if I did, the whole film would have taken 2 extra days to do, and it was just killing me watching these frames render so slowly for what is ultimately the most static, the most boring of shots, essentially, that I could and did just fake in post. And now we have gotten to the very last, the most contentious part of production for this film. Does the guy escape at the end? In this case, you can clearly see he does. You can see the silhouette of him breaking the window and jumping out, running away. But this is the biggest difference between the original version of the film and the version that we got. Was originally he was supposed to be trapped in the car, screaming, doing all this stuff, and then the monster bites and he dies. But there's certainly a camp in for the film that wanted the monster to escape, because it offers a sort of another layer of intrigue for the film, if you will, that the monster itself is not after people, it is after cars. And that's what the reveal at the end also reinforces. When you see all the cars in the stomach of the monster, you get the idea that this thing was only ever after cars. It doesn't even care that the guy escaped. So it makes it subverts your expectations in a way and makes the monster seem, first off, a little bit less scary, but also is a nice reveal, little twist reveal at the end, that it only cares about eating cars, chasing them, and if there are people in them, it doesn't care one way or the other. If it eats them, if it doesn't, that's the whole thing. And this is also me on a green screen doing the movements of the guy trying to escape from the car as well. And then we have a big chomp. And we fade up to a giant stomach filled with many, many cars. And you'll notice it's kind of hard to tell because we're trying to make it purposely a little bit ambiguous, but this monster's stomach is huge. It goes on for a while, and the monster itself is not really that big in the end. This is sort of right in the leaning into the magical aspect of this, where it's something that is rather medium in size on the outside, but then inside it has a huge cavernous stomach filled with all these cars. So by having the stomach itself be this sort of vast, endless expanse of cars and machinery and metal, we give the whole thing a more sort of weird, eerie, scary vibe to it. Instead, if we had made this a realistic size, which would have been like a quarter of what we see here, it just wouldn't feel as sort of ominously impressive, I suppose. And then, of course, we manufacture some reason for the car to sort of turn around to get the final shot of the mouth closing. And that's the film. And with that, if you want the extended version of this with more lore, more behind-the-scenes facts, and where we go into the project files of this film, head over to my Patreon where the extended cut lives. And with that, thank you for watching.